Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, and Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on our authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Hello, my name is Sam BLEICHER. I'm here today to talk about my books, The Plot to Cool the Planet, which will be the focus of today's discussion, and then this Wednesday and Thursday, Wednesday at 4 o'clock, Thursday at 6 o'clock, I will be talking about my new book called Guardians of the Solar Shield, and it is a follow-on to this book. So I think I should start here. And my apologies to anybody who looked for me Wednesday at 4 o'clock of last week, because there was a technical snafu of some kind, and I was ready to go, but the program wasn't. So, but I'm happy to have you back, and I look forward to hearing from you. I'd want to mention also right at the beginning that there is a chat box here, and you can see it on the screen on the right side of your screen. That's where you can put questions, and I'd welcome questions. It's a lot more fun to answer questions than it is to tell you about what I've written, which I've already read and talked about. So questions will make a much livelier presentation. So let me begin. The story of The Plot to Cool the Planet, there are actually two parallel stories. And last Wednesday, I presented that story. It is the story of the murder of a well-known, world-renowned, actually, climate scientist who is found traveling incognito on a luxury cruise ship where she has met a man who does not have her best interests at heart, shall we say. And people worldwide are upset about her murder. And the ship is a Canadian ship, so the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are the ones who send the investigators, who are Marie Veronique Roy and John Wolfe, to investigate the crime. And I will just leave it there. There's a lot of interesting twists. It's really it's a thriller. There are are some dangerous moments, more than a few dangerous moments, and a great deal of investigative sleuthing. So I think you'll enjoy that part of the book. But today I want to talk about the other plot that runs through the book, which is really the plot to cool the planet. It's about four diplomats who get together to try to do something to reduce solar radiation coming to the Earth as a means of mitigating the damage that is otherwise occurring from solar energy reaching the Earth and the carbon dioxide, excess carbon dioxide and methane in our atmosphere, keeping the heat here and raising the temperature on the Earth to levels that there are a wide variety of possibilities, but some of the possibilities are that it will just become a place that's unbearable for human beings everywhere. And even now, we are seeing the effects of climate change on melting glaciers, stronger hurricanes, more massive flooding, famines, droughts, causing mass migrations, causing wars and conflicts, domestic and international. And these things are only going to get worse as the planet gets hotter, because human beings are not designed to live in the temperatures that we might be reaching. And neither is much of the life on the planet, plants and animals. So with that background, let me start with the story. Some of you who have been watching the news have read about the conference in Scotland, the COP26. It's been in all the news, but you may have run across the Maldives in some of those presentations. It's one of many small island states that fear that they will simply be drowned by rising sea levels in the very near future. And while New York may not have a problem for decades, some of these places are having problems right now. There is an organization called AOSIS, the Alliance of Small Island States, and they meet annually and try to turn things in their direction, but they're small countries without a lot of economic or political or military influence, and so they really haven't been able to make the difference, although you've heard of them, and that is a process, is progress for them. There are 44 members of AOSIS, of which 39 are members of the United Nations. They comprise 28% of the developing world at the UN and 20% of the UN's total membership. And their peoples, so you might be surprised at the population size. The peoples altogether on these 39 countries constitute 5% of the world's population, which is about the same as the percentage of the US population and the percentage of Western Europe's population. So it's not an insignificant number of people. It's hundreds of millions altogether. The difference is that in the Maldives, for example, the mean elevation above the water is about 6 feet. And the median elevation, which is where the elevation that covers half the area, is less than 6 feet. And that's where most of the people live, of course, because they live near the coast, where the land is flat, where they can grow crops, where they can go fishing, where they can build houses, not on mountainsides. They are seriously in danger right now. And the fiction begins where the ambassador from the Maldives decides something has to be done, and we can't wait. The small islands can't wait for international machinery to finally recognize that some kind of a solar veil, some kind of a mechanism to reflect the sunlight, a part of the sunlight, only about 2% is quite enough to make the difference, back into space before all the glaciers melt, before the plants die, before the famines and the massive migrations and the wars. Even though the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change initially spent all of its time looking at 2100, those climatologists and geologists who think in centuries and eons were not really focusing on the political and social and demographic impacts of what is happening, what is beginning to happen right now, but will only get worse over the next 3 or 4 decades, really, no matter what we do, short of solar geoengineering, as it's called, or solar radiation management. And that's the message I've been trying to get across, the substantive message I've been trying to get across. The reason I wrote novels was because I wanted to reach people who aren't reading the scientific reports and who don't follow these issues and who haven't, and the media, frankly, haven't been very helpful in explaining what the problems are. So I hope some of you will read the books and learn for yourself. But the reason they are novels is because I wanted real people to know about the problem, but I want them to see real people struggling with these problems. I see I have a question about, will the Earth run out of water? Well, the Earth will not run out of water. The question is whether the Earth will run out of fresh water, water that isn't contaminated with salt and other chemicals, which more and more of the ocean is. That is not the problem. The problem is rising sea levels as we melt the ice and it flows into the ocean and raises sea levels, the ice on land. So this ambassador from the Maldives, Mohammed Ibrahim, is very distressed, and he thinks if the governments aren't going to do it right, we need to do it on our own. He starts outlining a plan to create a solar veil. It doesn't take a lot of money. It isn't about money. $10 billion a year would cover it, and $10 billion, if you compare it to defense budgets, is really not a large amount of money. But the first thing he has to do is try to recruit some help. He goes to another ambassador named Kamala Pandey, who is from Trinidad and Tobago. He's also a fictional character, and tries to recruit him. And Pandey is very uncomfortable with the idea of doing anything that's outside of diplomatic channels and outside of the UN's purview. But he's very seriously concerned about Trinidad and Tobago and his children and grandchildren, and he decides, well, he'll see. He doesn't think the whole thing will work, but he's willing to give it a try. Then they recruit another ambassador from Mauritius, Anna Doyle, also fictitious, who is also interested, willing to give it a try, in part because he thinks it'd be a nice gesture, but he doesn't think it'll be working. And then Mohammed Ibrahim recruits Wang Shu, who is a young woman diplomat from Singapore, whom he already knows because they had an affair some years before, and he ended it because the situations were impossible in terms of their ever being together publicly. He would lose his job, she would lose her job. The government of the Maldives would not approve of a marriage between a Muslim and a Confucian. That is not legal in their country. And besides, marrying someone from another country is already a problem for a diplomat because it creates conflicts of interest. Well, the rest of the story, that lays the groundwork. The rest of the story is Wang Shu trying to get money from the Singapore Prime Minister, and Anirudh Doyal trying to get the Indonesian Prime Minister interested in this project, which they do, and the project is pursued, and it is successful in slowing down the change in the weather and actually improving the change in the weather. But in the process, the program runs into, you might say, Russian efforts to melt the polar ice caps sooner so that they can ship oil from the east coast of Russia on the Pacific Ocean to Europe through the Arctic all year round. That will be a vast improvement over going from the coast of Siberia in the Pacific around the Vietnamese Peninsula, around India, around the Cape of Good Hope, all the way back to Europe. So there is a conflict. The Soviet Union considers these ships these aircraft to be a violation of their sovereignty because they fly over the Russian territory to get to the Arctic, where they put these chemicals in the atmosphere, and they shoot one of the planes down, and I can see I have questions appearing on my screen. First of all, there is an awakening, yes, and that's good to know. But changing our lifestyle isn't just a matter of eating differently or getting an electric car, which I strongly recommend because it helps. But our housing has to change, our transportation systems have to change, our manufacturing systems have to change, and we have to find ways to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Trees are wonderful, but they aren't going to do it. And the problem is that most of the people that are talking about growing trees don't have any mechanism to make sure that the trees stay alive. Once the trees get to be harvestable, there's the danger that they will be harvested and the carbon dioxide that they have absorbed will go back into the atmosphere. These are it's a very complex problem we have, and it's going to take a lot of effort to get us even close to where we'd like to get. So to just go back to the story, the Russians go to the United Nations Security Council and demand that this activity be stopped. And there is a confrontation with the United States, because if the Russians can stop planes from flying over the Arctic, the United States can't fly planes over the Arctic. Or maybe the answer is everybody can fly planes over the Arctic and anybody can do this. So there's got to be a consensus. And the story becomes a diplomatic thriller, a military thriller, a political thriller, involving U.S. politics, involving politics with Russia and other countries. And finally, there is a resolution. The book is not an end of the world story. So the program is there, and people ask me. The book ends on an upbeat note, and when you read the next book, you'll discover that Muhammad and Wang Shu get together again. I've got a question. Which country do you think will sink first? They aren't sinking. The water is rising. It's a slightly different concept. Be careful of that, because many areas are sinking. Miami, it depends on what you mean by a country. The small ones, like Maldives, will be among the first. And hurricanes and flooding will create disasters in these low countries before they are completely inundated. But Tangier Island in the Chesapeake Bay is likely to disappear, is already disappearing. It is much smaller than it was 20 years ago. And it isn't that it's partly that the island is sinking, but it's mostly that the water is rising. So many countries will be affected. Singapore is only a few feet above sea level, and there are parts of Singapore that will be flooded all the time. New York will be flooded. Parts of New York will be flooded all the time unless they can build a seawall like the folks in Amsterdam do. See, the rich countries can take some steps to protect themselves. The poor countries can't afford to do those things. So it is more of a problem for the poor countries. And the rich people can move to other places and buy property and move inland. The fishermen and farmers in the Maldives, their only outside source of income is tourism, which comes up in the later book. And if people lose their place where they are, they have no place to go. Other countries, as we've seen, are not eager to take in immigrants just because they have to move. I have a question. Some people still don't believe in climate change. We have to influence people to do their share in their own way, even if they don't believe in climate change, but the reality is they're going to see it more and more, and there are fewer and fewer doubters, except some political extremists, and they're getting some help from some people who are committed to the oil industry and just can't believe that they're going to be out of business in a few years. The goal of no fossil fuel use by 2050 for an oil company, 30 years is not a long time. They put in pipelines that last for 75 or 100 years. They put in oil wells that they hope will last for 50 years. And this is a waste of money if you think that we're going to turn all that off by 2050, and in fact take steps in that direction much sooner. So it is a great problem. People will change because it will be advantageous. Electric cars are actually cheaper to operate and require much less maintenance. It's a much simpler piece of equipment than an internal combustion engine. So there are changes like that. There are going to be changes about food. Prices are going to change. Beef is going to be more expensive. Red meat of all kinds is going to be more expensive because we have been taking advantage of groundwater and surface water that won't be available to grow the food supply for the animals. And things are going to change. Most of the things that are going to change for the worse if we don't do anything. We can make some of these problems less onerous if we take steps. And that's why the governments are all saying, well, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. But everybody wants to do it next year. I saw some cartoons, some jokes from some on Twitter where people were saying, oh, yes, and I'm going to stop drinking beer in 2050. And comments like that, meaning, oh, sure, I'll promise to do something 30 years from now. But we don't have 30 years. We need to take very substantial steps sooner than that. We do not have the technology to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And even before then, we have to stop emitting methane, which is otherwise known as natural gas, and we use it, and it's valuable, except that when it comes out of the ground, it's not that valuable. It's more valuable when it gets to the user. And companies who transmit natural gas, who drill for and transmit natural gas, have not been very careful about keeping it from being emitted. And of course, there are leaks from pipelines, there are leaks from storage tanks, and that is another problem that has to be addressed, and soon, because methane is 80 times more dangerous over a 10-year period than carbon dioxide. I say over a 10-year period because it dissipates over that period of time, but it still is doing a lot of damage, and a lot more than anybody recognized 5 years ago. So that's a bit of the story, and I'll be happy to take questions about the story or the book. I should tell you that The Plot to Cool the Planet is available on Amazon, if you don't mind using Amazon, or on Bookshop.org as a paperback. On Amazon, you can also get it as an ebook. And you can get it as an ebook from Barnes and Noble, I believe. And you can get paperbacks at your local bookstore. They might have to order it and have it brought in for you, but it's available. Any place, any bookstore, most any bookstore in the world uses Ingram's directory, and this book is listed, and they know how to order it. Just have to ask them. So the book is available. I hope you will read it, and I hope that once you read it, you will be able to educate other people. The ability to talk about this subject intelligently takes some learning for most all of us. Well, there's a comment about the way we eat red meat and the fact that it involves a lot of damage to the environment. Cows themselves emit methane, and that is, as I say, a more powerful pollutant than carbon dioxide. That needs to change too. That's part of the reason the price will go up, because it will be, if they have to make the kinds of controls that are necessary, and if they have to deal with the crops that they're raising and the impact of that, prices will go up. It'll become a delicacy. It won't be basic, the usual food for most people. The worst influence of all of those who make their billions on things that do all harm, and they have no care for future generations. Well, yes, there is some of that going on. On the other hand, I don't mean to defend the man who designed and was the spearhead behind the Tesla, Elon Musk, who is today apparently the richest man in the world. He's helping us because he's helping us to get there. I'm told that I have only about 2 more minutes, but if people have more questions, we can extend and talk more. So please let me know if you have more questions, and if you do, put them on the screen or put them in the chat box, and I will do my best to answer them. Stage manager tells me there are still questions here. Let's see the questions, please. How do I do that? Okay, stage manager will do it. Hold on a second. Much more fun to answer questions and to talk about this than it is to just lecture about the book, because the fun part of the book is the characters and the locations, and finding places for these people to go where I've been, where I can write about what I've seen, and then going on Google and finding all the details. Where is the hotel? What's its exact name? On what floor is the restaurant? Things like that happen in a novel that I don't have to make up. They're real places. I haven't made up the geography either. So the stage manager says she will show them, but I haven't seen them yet. So that's the fun part of the book. The interesting part of the book for most people. People like to read about people, and that's why I chose to write novels. What do you think a commoner can do to help the environment? Well, I will tell you the most important thing is to get active politically and vote. In Virginia, where I vote, we just lost a Democratic governor to a Republican governor, and the Republican governor has doubts about whether climate change is real, and it'll be interesting to see what he does when he's actually governing, and how he's going to deal with flooding of Hampton Roads, which is the world's largest naval base in Virginia, and things like that. You ask, what do I owe the real people upon whom you base your characters? Well, I didn't base my characters on real people. They are all fictional. I don't know anybody like any of them, except, what do I owe to the fictional president of the United States? who doesn't actually look like Joe Biden or come from Delaware. Um, the premier of Singapore, the prime minister of Singapore, who is in my book and who is a real person, I guess I would say he's a public figure, and I don't feel bad about using him and putting fictional words in his mouth. I've got the usual disclaimer at the beginning about any relation to people, dead or alive, is coincidental. What was the hardest scene to write? The hardest scenes to write, there are several. Well, first of all, it's hard to write love scenes that are intriguing and not too explicit, and not have the dialogue seem sort of trite and canned. But in my experience over the years, I have found that many of those relationships, the conversation is trite and uninteresting. It's this, we say the same things, but making it more readable is a problem. Some of the other conversations, the diplomatic conversations, the attempts to persuade people to cooperate in this effort, are inevitably brief arguments in favor of doing something and brief objections, raising all the objections to the problems. And so those scenes are hard. They're hard to bring alive. But I've done that in part by making up cabinet members in Indonesia, for example, who have differing views on climate change. Some of their leaders in their cabinet, at least in my book, are not really believers and think it's the whole thing is not a hoax exactly, but they don't think it's a serious problem, and they don't understand that there are lots of low-lying. They've got large areas in large islands in Indonesia, but a lot of people live in low-lying areas, and they're going to have to move, and that alone is going to create political pressure and a degree of chaos, because many of the people only have the land they're on, and it's not marketable when it's going to be underwater. So that is a problem too. But these kinds of conflicts, I've been to plenty of diplomatic and bureaucratic meetings, and they're couched in such terms that they don't make good dialogue for a novel. You have to spice it up a little bit with some real arguments among the characters. So, more questions? What are the common traps for aspiring writers? Well, the first thing I would say is do your homework about writing, do your homework about publishing, and if that doesn't discourage you, then give it a try. But I have to tell you that I wasn't very good at doing that. I just wanted to write a book and started writing. And I think my stories are pretty good. I had no agent. I had no one to promote my book. I didn't know how books are promoted. And the result has been that they've not been bestsellers, even though, of course, I think they should be. And so do some of my readers. And other readers, several readers, have said these stories would make great movies or TV series. But I have no way of reaching those kinds of people. I've never had any relationship with them. So that's, and beyond that, what do you say? Use Grammarly because it'll help you keep you from writing impossible sentences or non-sentences. Think through where your characters are going. Although I found that once I created the characters, they were telling me where they were going some of the time, rather than the other way around. I wanted them to be in character. I wanted them to do the things that one would expect, and I've tried to create the characters to do the things I want them to do to make the story. But the story unfolds in part. So don't think you have to have the whole structure in advance. You need a structure, and then when you write the structure and you reread the book, you discover that chapters are in the wrong place. They aren't. They don't work from the point of view of keeping people's attention. Um, there's a reason why there are two plots in the plot to cool the planet, because everyone agreed that the assassination of the scientist needed to come at the beginning to get people interested. Um, and that starting out with what could only be some dissertations on climate change was not going to keep readers. So there are things like that to think about too. I'm amazed at how much you can learn from Google, from Google Maps, from travel sites and other things like that. So you don't even have to be at a place. I do have a chapter about um, a town in Sweden that's famous because I think his name is Wallander. He's a detective. He's a fictional detective, by the way. But the place is famous because his detective work takes place there. I've never been there, but my scientist was born there and grew up there, and that shaped some of her life in important ways, because she knew something about how books and media work. So, do you have any more questions? Do I try more to be original or deliver readers what they want? Well, I'm trying to be both. Um, you've got to have a story that they haven't heard before, but you've also got to have a story that keeps their attention. It doesn't necessarily please readers. I don't want to use that word, but it has to make them want to finish the book. At least that's my view. The goal is not just to have them buy the book. The goal is to have them read the book, and that's a much more difficult task. Uh, and thousands of books are a couple of thousand books are printed in the United States every day, and separating your book from anybody else's is a difficult task. So it's I'm not sure that's the way you should write a book. You should write a book that tells the story you want to tell, and see what happens to it, and hope that somebody gets excited about it who wants to write reviews in the New York Times Magazine or whatever. How long do I spend researching before beginning a book? With these books, I didn't. I mean, let me put it a different way. I've been teaching about and studying about and writing about climate change and solar geoengineering for a decade. And actually, I became aware of the problem in the 1970s when I was in the government at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So in that sense, yes, I've been researching this for a long time. And a lot of the international diplomacy material is based on things I've seen and heard and to some extent done. But as I say, you can Google materials, you can learn about any place, which solves a lot of practical problems of detail. To give you an example, do I Google myself? I haven't. Maybe I should. Are you trying to tell me something? Maybe I ought to do that. I had a friend who wrote a book about the Supreme Court, and so he was writing about Washington, D.C. He's actually a Canadian. He wrote in one sentence in his book was about how the hero drove south on Interstate 66. Any of you who know about Washington or even know about how the highways are numbered, the interstate highways are numbered, know it doesn't go south, it goes east and west. Even numbers go east and west, odd numbers go north and south. And this reader of the book said, well, I stopped right there. The guy obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, if that's the level of precision that is necessary, there aren't very many books that will pass muster. I'll just say that. Okay. Um, I'm wondering if I should Google myself now. I will do that after the show is over and see if I find anything that I didn't expect. And you can, by the way, I was interviewed by Lucy West, who is an author herself, as the author of the hour on Sunday. And that interview is now available on YouTube. You may find it more enjoyable than this time, but I think I'd like you to watch that. She asked good questions. What future do you see for environmentalists? Well, I'm not sure what you mean by environmentalists. If you mean people who are activists, I can only say they're going to live in the same world the rest of us do, and it's not going to be a very pleasant place. And they have the problem that they're going to have to live through much more of it than I am, for example, or that older people are. But I think that this is something where, as time is passing, we are seeing the environmentalists vindicated about climate change, about drinking water, contamination, about food, and what growing the food that we enjoy is doing to the planet in terms of raising crops to feed animals to feed us, and about about these impacts. They're real, and we have allowed the planet and encouraged the planet in a way to be populated by, 7 billion people now. The extreme predictions are that we'll be 1 billion people before the end of the century. And if that's the case, it's going to be a pretty miserable time to get there. We have not thought ahead about how we will sustain that population, give it health care, give it food, create a world that we would like to live in. So, well, I think that's all I'm going to say for today. I hope I will see you on Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And I will be live then at Wednesday at 4 o'clock and Thursday at 6 o'clock talking about the other book, which is shorter and easier reading. And it has the same backdrop, but it isn't as deep in science about climate change and about the consequences of climate change. So I hope I will see you then. And I've mentioned where you can get my books. Amazon and any place else you buy books should be able to get you a copy. And I should add one other thing. I have a website. It's called Sam Bleacher Author, no punctuation, just sambleacherauthor.com. And not only is there more information about the books and where you can buy them and all that, and about me, there's a contact page at the back of that. If you have more questions, if you want to converse with me about climate change, if you want to read the book and converse with me about the book, I'd be happy to carry on a conversation about that. I'm very interested in the subject. In fact, it's, I'm beginning to think I'm obsessed with it because it's the only thing I'm really excited about in the way of intellectual effort. And I haven't given up, but I'm not as hopeful as I was about a happy future for all of us. I think I'll stop right there. Thank you very much. I appreciate your being here. I want to thank the Festival of Storytellers and Reader's Magnet for giving me this opportunity. I'll see you again soon. I guess I can turn this off.